All right, my name is Travis White, and I'm going to be doing my SDI Basic Hand Tools Lab right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart my Sig Sauer P250, and of course, before starting any work on a firearm, need to make sure that it's safe. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to drop that mag, take it out of the holster, set it back, make sure that it is safe. It is safe. So now let's get started. All right, first thing, let me talk about my workspace. I like to use a white towel to lay my parts down on so that I can visually see the parts out in the open without anything being hidden by dirt on the table or a dark floor. I've also got my SDI padding here, and the purpose of that, of course, is to not have to lay my weapon down on a hard surface. Just off camera over here, I have an exploded view and parts diagram, just in case I need it. And over here to the side, I have my hand tools. First thing, of course, to any cleaning is going to be the basic breakdown or field strip. Take down the takedown lever. Slides right off. Spring out. Barrel out. Slide off, exposing the lower receiver. Breaking the lower receiver out, I'm going to pull the firing control group out. Pull out the takedown lever. And then the firing control group comes right out. Okay, so now getting the fire control group broken apart. Pretty simple. For the most part, just a couple of small pieces to think about. And one thing to do is, that you gotta remember is inside the hammer here, there's a compressed spring. So again, in the interest of safety, I'm gonna take my glasses and put them on in case it lets go. First thing I'm gonna do is I am going to remove the spring here. I'm going to just pull the spring right out of its catch. Spring comes off. Trigger's off. Okay, next I'm going to be removing the hammer. To do that, I'll take a punch. And I'm going to push the pin holding this compressed spring in and the safety. Again, I've got my finger over the compressed spring. And there is the spring right there. Earlier when I took this apart, I had gone ahead and cleaned everything, so I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. Next thing to come off is the pin that holds the hammer on. Now when I pull this off, I'm going to get the safety lever is going to come off also. So I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to note how I take it apart so that the lever goes back on properly. All right. And once that is done, I'll pull out the pin that is holding the slide catch lever. Again, I'm going to push that pin out. It's got a smaller pin, but not much danger of it popping and going anywhere. So pin comes out. The slide catch lever comes off, and the firing control group is now completely broken down. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to break the slide down to its base components. First thing I need to do is there's a roll pin right there that I need to get out. So I don't currently have a block or a weapons puck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the plastic ends of my needle nose pliers as a sort of block. Get my punch right there. Let me get a little bit thinner punch. There we go. Got my hammer. There it goes. Okay, roll pin is out. I'm gonna put that right to the side. At this point, I'm gonna hold the extractor end, and holding the extractor end with my finger over the firing pin pops right out. There it is right there. Next, I'm gonna use that same punch, maybe a little bit bigger one, and I am going to press in right here on the rear extractor spring guide. When I do that, the sight and extractor comes out. There's a pin right here, but I have not had any problems with there's a spring right here, but I have any problems with that spring coming out. So no big deal there. And that is the slide completely broke down. Weapon's now ready for a thorough cleaning. Okay, the next thing I'm gonna do now that it's all broken down and I've got the weapon thoroughly cleaned, I'm gonna put it all back together in reverse order. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the sight here, the extractor. I'm gonna piece those back into its part. I'm gonna take the slide, get it started. Once it gets started, I'll use that punch in the extractor spring guide. Slide pops right back in. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the firing pin. Firing pin has a groove right here. That groove is there to allow for the roll pin to slide through there, and that helps to keep this firing pin from being able to go anywhere. Press in the extractor, the spring assisted extractor. Line up my groove to the roll pin side and slide it right through there. All right, firing pin is now in. Make sure I got my hole completely open using a light there, and it looks good to me for the roll pin to be able to go in there. So I'll take that roll pin. Once again, using my needle nose pliers as a weapons block. Get the roll pin set. I'm gonna use the back end of my punch right here. A little awkward there. I'm gonna use that to push the firing pin in to make sure that hole's lined up. And then I'm gonna use a hammer. Looks like I hit the firing pin just a little bit, so let me back it off just enough. Have to hammer it out a little bit. It's always a little bit tricky. A little patience will get me there though. Get that roll pin, see if I can't get it past the firing pin. All right, there we're in. Use my punch here and tap it in there, flush. Perfect. Firing pin moves just a little bit, so I'm good there, and the slide is put back together. Okay, now that the slide is back together, I'm gonna move that back to the fire control group. I'm gonna put it back together also in basically reverse order. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the slide lever catch, and I'm going to put it back on. All right, got that back on. Next, take the spring compressed spring. I'm going to put it back up into the hammer. Make sure my hammer is oriented in the correct direction. You know, I'm going to take that. I don't have to put that compressed pin back in there yet, or the spring back in there. Let's get this right here lined up. Pin goes back through the hammer. Slips in all the way through, no problem. And I need to make sure this is oriented right, so I just took a look at the exploded view again to make sure that my pins are going in on the correct side, and they are. And what I need to do is I need to make sure that this right here goes in here in front. So pin comes out just a little bit. So I can put this in here, the safety. Make sure my holes are lined up. There we go. I'm in there good. And the safety catch is in there good. All right, perfect. Moving on to the compressed spring now. Compressed spring goes on. What I'm gonna do on this one is I'm gonna grab a punch that is about the same diameter as both springs. And what that's gonna let me do is going to at least let me get the spring started so that I don't at least caught on the edge of the pin. So I'm using my punch. I'm going to compress my spring. Now I did this yesterday, and of course I shot the springs across the garage. I want to get a little bit bigger. There we go. That goes down and we get the pin started. So the pin is started across the springs. Let me I can get a smaller for compress the edge. Yeah, I'll let it go. All right, I got that pin almost all the way across, so now this will work accurately and correctly. Not quite. All right, now the pin's all the way across. All right, perfect. So now that that's all the way over there, I need to get my, got to swing the safety catch has a groove through it that I'm gonna have to make sure that pin goes through as well. It's under a little bit of tension here, so it's not lining up just right. So I'm going to use a punch again to put some pressure, line that hole. Once I did that, I was able to push it right through with my finger. Hammer's on there, hammer's good. Pins are all the way in. All right, now that we've got the hammer on, everything's looking good. The last step for the fire control group is to install the trigger bar, and the spring. The trigger has a flange on this end with a small post. Trigger bar has a very convenient hole on the front of it that fits into that post, and then the spring will attach to the back. So I'm going to get the trigger started, leaving a little bit of room to get that post going. Once that's on there, make sure the trigger is seated all the way through to the other side and the post is covering it. All right, done. Slide that trigger bar to the back and put the spring on. I've tried using my safety wire pliers or my needle-nose pliers here, and by far putting it back together using my fingers is much easier. All right, back on. Ready to go back into the lower receiver. Take that right there, get it started on the back, pull the hammer back, let you move the trigger, slide it through the trigger housing, press it down, perfectly on there. All right. Next thing, we'll put the takedown lever back in, rotate it down 90 degrees, slide goes back on. We'll push that far enough back that we can engage the takedown lever. And function check's good. All right, so that concludes my SDI Basic Hand Tools Lab project. I can definitely say that I learned a lot while I was doing this. One of the things that I learned was the biggest difference between brass and steel. Of course, I inherently know that it is the strength of it, but it's really easy to damage punches if you happen to grab the wrong ones. So no big deal, lesson learned. I thought they were a little bit more firm than they were, but I'll get a couple new ones and be a little bit more selective when I grab my punch to do anything. Peace.